This just came out, so I thought this was very interesting. But to get into the fun side of this conversation, there's a reason I bring up Adam Beck. It just happened to have that this thing came out yesterday. But so I was watching a few documentaries this past week, and I actually think I know who Satoshi is. And there's a lot of articles that saying how much Bitcoin Satoshi has, and this guy was tracking. He's saying these black lines here are the ones that Satoshi mined, and he's never spent them. It adds up to about a million Bitcoin, right? And so there's a lot of debate on who Satoshi is because they're like, well, most people would have spent it at some point between now and then, at least some portion of it. So there's speculation that he's dead. Um, there's a guy named by the name of Hal Finney, which was the first guy Satoshi ever sent a Bitcoin to, and he was also the first developer for Bitcoin. He died some years ago. He developed ALS, so there's some suspicion that he's Satoshi. But the funny thing is, like, if that were true, then there's literally 4 messages of him just talking to himself, which is just bizarre, right? So that shouldn't happen. But I actually think this guy Adam Beck is Satoshi, and I'm not the only one. Apparently, this is like an open secret in the crypto community at a very high level. And the reason is because Satoshi has a few markers for who he is. One of the main ones is that he codes in C++ very well, that he's supposedly British because so I have this book full of Satoshi's writings, and he spells things like us Canadians with honor, the O-U-R and stuff like that. So he spells it with like a Canadian. So they suspect that he's British. And every writing he has, he does a double space. So at the end of every sentence, instead of a single space, it's a double space. And apparently it's a carryover from I think it was some university programs where when you're writing formal papers, you have to do a double space, and it started with a typewriter. So that gives you an indication of his age and his education. And there's a couple of like,
Sorry. That's how I was always taught. It was a double space after a sentence.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple of things like that that point to that the market that he hits, and there's a few other things too. So Satoshi is known to be an inventor because he supposedly invented Bitcoin, right? Well, Adam actually has a bunch of patents, like tons and tons of patents, but he stopped applying for patents between 2007 and 2011. Which was around the time that Bitcoin was getting invented. Bitcoin, the white paper showed up in 2008, late 2008, and the first Bitcoin was mined in 2009. And so that period where he wasn't filing any patents, it just seems like he fell off the earth. So it's like, what was he doing during that time, right? So there's a lot of things like that. And he also invented this thing called Hashcash, which is very similar to Bitcoin. It's like a precursor to Bitcoin. So from a resume perspective, he ticks all the boxes. Oh, and he was also one of the original cypherpunks. So Bitcoin actually came from the cypherpunk movement that came in the 70s. So a bunch of guys, computer guys, they saw that the government was starting to be potentially too controlling. And then they saw the internet coming, and they're like, we need to find a way to create cryptography, to use cryptography to kind of give ourselves some freedom or some anonymity, because if Big Brother's always looking at what we're doing, then it's not good, right? So one of the things, Sam, if you could share my screen. So one of the things that he did, he's actually very well known in the community, was that there was a piece of cryptography that the NSA deemed a weapon, and so they tried to force them to not use it anymore. So what he did was he actually printed the code on a T-shirt, sold it or gave away the T-shirt, and had people send it all around the world because technically it's protected by copyright at that point. So he did like a backhanded way to kind of make this code unenforceably controlled by the NSA by printing it on a T-shirt and just had people like wear it all over the place, and it got transferred all over the world. So Adam Beck is actually very famous in the cryptography world. So he checks literally every box you would need. Oh, and he also has a degree in distributed systems, which is what Bitcoin is. It's a distributed system. And so he ticks every single box that Bitcoin needs. But there's one problem. And that one problem is a philosophical one, because Bitcoin was made to be a decentralized platform. It's altruistic, it's open source, blah, 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 right? Adam Beck is the CEO of Blockstream. And Blockstream is a for-profit organization building software on top of Bitcoin. And so the only argument people have against him as being the CEO or being the creator of Bitcoin is the fact that well, why is he now making a for-profit company on top of Bitcoin?
That's what I don't understand. What would his incentive be to do that?
See, I don't know. I don't know if it's.
He already has 1 billion Bitcoin, right? Or 1 million Bitcoin.
He has 1 million Bitcoin, but for various reasons, I don't think. So there's suspicion that the guy's dead. The guy lost his keys, which shouldn't be possible for a cryptographer. But I think the reason he's not moving is because you can't. Because if you've been trading Bitcoin for any period of time, you start to see that anytime there's a whale call, the Bitcoin price drops significantly. And God forbid a single coin moved from that wallet, I think Bitcoin price would crash, because suddenly people think, oh, we thought there was 1 million float here locked up, lost, and suddenly there's an extra 1 million Bitcoin in the ecosystem. So I don't think he can actually move it. But if you look at his original writings, though, he's clearly not a guy motivated by money. He just wanted to build something that works. But at the same time, like, I don't think philosophically it's like a bad thing to create a second layer on top of Bitcoin, right? Because a lot of the Bitcoin hardcore guys are saying, right?
And if he was doing that to promote Bitcoin and he was doing that to take Bitcoin to the next level, that would be really understandable. Like, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. I know that I don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. But I think he may be onto something.
Well, I just think it's funny because, like, Blockstream, ironically, is actually one of the most hated companies in the crypto ecosystem because they're trying to be for profit. And I'm like, that's basically the only reason they hate him and they hate Blockstream and they refuse to say that he's Satoshi. But I'm like, it's not like he's building a competitor. It's not like he went out, built Bitcoin, and then built Ethereum to compete against. Like, he left Bitcoin as is. It's perfect. It's running. And it's like, why don't we build these second layer options on top of Bitcoin now, right? So one of the things he's building is Lightning Network, and the other thing is Liquid. So Liquid is like a decentralized trading platform, and Lightning is basically the Visa on top of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
Like, how is that bad, right?
No, that's definitely positive for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it seems like he's advancing his baby, so to speak.
Yeah, I just thought this was super cool and and apparently it's like an open secret, because I think a lot of Sam knows there's a guy named Samson Mew who's a developer for Blockstream, and he's a very well liked guy. So it's like a lot of people that are respected, I think, know he's Satoshi because their signatures are just there, but they can't say it.
Why does nobody? I didn't even know that. Like, why does nobody know who this guy is?
Why does nobody know who Satoshi is?
Yeah, I didn't even know he was a mystery.
I have a question for you. Do you guys agree that it's good that we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Like, there's sort of a mystique towards it?
1,000%.
100%. I just didn't know that nobody knew him.
Yeah. So even Adam Beck
try and kidnap him.
No, that's the perfect point, right? Adam Beck even said in an interview, because they interviewed him a lot, not saying he's Satoshi, but just because he's one of the big players in the industry. And they're like saying, do you know who Satoshi is? And he's like, no, I don't know. And he's like, I think it's a great idea that Satoshi kept his anonymity, because if you build something and you are the leader, you become almost a cult status. And even if this thing is decentralized and it's open source, if you ever get to a point where there's disagreement, they would always look to the leader to solve the problem, right? Or whatever the leader does is representative of the whole industry. And he's like, you can't have a figurehead there. If you do, that opens it up to so many attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's really why crypto is the currency of the people.
Well, that's like one of the things. Like, look at Ethereum. You have Vitalik. Anything Ethereum, you think Vitalik, right? That is a point of failure. He's such a genius by staying anonymous. So Caitlin, to your question, so this is one of the things that's for Adam Beck. He's a part of the cypherpunk movement. Bitcoin, the white paper was published in a cypherpunk, the cypherpunk email list, right? And so when he sent it, nobody knew who he was. He just took a name, and that list got a lot of developers involved. And throughout the years, there was a Bitcoin forum where they were talking about the code and how to implement it and how to upgrade it. And there's several emails back and forth between him and the other developers. But he was really careful never to imply anything specific about himself in terms of his age, education. He was just very straight to the point about the project. So those things I mentioned. Sorry?
He was still like helping people set up the mining procedure and like walk them through the whole process and everything. He was just doing it all remote. Nobody knew who he was.
Well, he was developing with them for 2 years because once he published the white paper, it was like it was the roadmap, but all the little details had to get built, and there's a ton of coding that needed to be done. So a lot of people got involved with it, and so that was another clue, by the way. So there was like 6 core developers that stayed at the beginning that are part of Bitcoin Core, and Satoshi had contacts with all of them, and there's emails and things. Adam Beck doesn't have a single email with back and forth with Satoshi. So he was part of it, but then he never communicated with himself, right? So there's
I know that you've done a lot of like reading and research on this. So let me ask you, the idea that Satoshi is not a person, but a group of people or a government, an organization, what do you think about that?
Well, before I learned about this, I actually thought Satoshi was a group. I thought it was really unlikely that a single person would possess the coding, the understanding of the financial system, of understanding game theory, just the whole broad and deep understanding of all these areas you needed to build Bitcoin was just, I didn't think one person could possess all that skill.
Mm-hmm.
But now I kind of do. But yeah, so I'm pretty certain it's this person. And the other thing that's funny is there's a guy that Time Magazine outed back like about 10 years ago as being Satoshi Nakamoto. His name was Dorian Nakamoto. He's an engineer that lived in California. You've heard about that, right?
I remember that, actually.
Yeah, so he's clearly not, right? He denied it all the way. But what's funny was Adam Beck lived in the same neighborhood as Satoshi Nakamoto.
And he lived in the same neighborhood as Hal Finney as well.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. So then there's...
And I believe Dorian worked at Google.
Yeah. So there's some speculation that maybe Adam Beck just met the Dorian Nakamoto and just thought, hey, that's a cool last name. Why don't I take it as a pseudonym?
Well, what does Nakamoto mean in Japanese?
I think it's just a name.
Like, I remember hearing Satoshi meant something, Nakamoto meant something else.
Oh, I don't know. I actually didn't know about that.
I should look that up.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so for a while there, I thought it was Hal Finney, but then no, Hal Finney is just a really special person. But I think it's Adam Beck. But
so Satoshi means wisdom in Japanese.
Oh, thanks for pulling out, Sam. Oh shit, that's actually highly appropriate. Does Nakamoto mean anything? What is that? I can't read that on my screen. I can't get the. But does it have a meaning? Oh,
maybe he just thought it was a cool last name. Then maybe that supports you.
Yeah, so there it is. Yeah. So that makes perfect sense. My neighbor's Nakamoto. I like wisdom, so we'll just Satoshi Nakamoto.
Put those two together, and we'll roll with it.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.